voters who are our candidates for tonight, and also welcome to all of you for coming and attending this event. It's been a warm night. My name, most of you know, is Regina Gouvenier. I'm president of the League of Women Voters for Port Washington and Manhasset. I'd like to begin by thanking also the UUC, the women's group, who are co-hosting this event. They're being gracious enough to share this facility with us. And also my thanks to North Shore TV, who are live streaming this and putting it on their channel. And also they will be fixing the film so that we can put it on our YouTube video. So tomorrow you should be able to view it tomorrow evening. We try to get it up within 24 hours. I'd like to also mention that as a league, the local, state, and national, we are nonpartisan. So the reason we have two candidates tonight is because we have two candidates running for an election as Democrats, but we can't have an empty seat, ever. We also don't support any political party or candidate. Candidate forums are one of the ways in which we make democracy work. These forums enable the voters to hear what candidates have to say, to ask them questions on issues that matter to them in an atmosphere of civil discourse. If you'd like to join our league, as someone in the audience did, we do have a QR code where you can pull up the membership form on your phone, and there's also some more forms outside that you can take. We'd like you to join our league. Realize that even though we have women in the title, it's not for women only. So men, if you'd like to sign up, please join us. And without further delay, I'm going to turn this forum over to our moderator for this evening, Kai Rosenthal. She's from the New York City League. So, Kai, it's all yours.
Thank you, Regina. For over a century, the League of Women Voters has sought to make democracy work by promoting civil discourse in nonpartisan events so that voters like you can hear the views and observe the behavior of candidates on a range of issues relevant to this community. I'm about to read the debate procedures. Both of the candidates have agreed to these, and by being here tonight, you as the audience have also agreed, as noted on the large signs on the entrance doors. The League has used procedures like these for over 60 years to ensure fair process and encourage civil discourse. So these are the procedures for the candidates. So 1, the moderator will be a member of the League of Women Voters from outside the district. As Regina said, I'm a member of the League in New York City. 2, the sequence of speaking for opening and closing statements has been determined by drawing lots before the event, and the same order will apply for both opening and closing statements. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for an opening statement. After all candidates have spoken, the moderator will open the meeting with questions. In all cases, I will be the final arbiter of whether questions should be answered. Questions must not be duplicative, personal, or abusive. Each candidate will be given 90 seconds to answer each question. At my discretion, the time for a response may be reduced so long as it is the same for everyone. There will be no rebuttal. Questions may be addressed to a specific candidate or to candidates in general, although all candidates will be given an opportunity to answer every question. I will attempt to rotate the order of responses for each question. A league member will act as timekeeper, 1/2 minute from the end of any given time period. The timekeeper will alert the speaker, as she's doing now, by a prearranged signal. The candidates who ignore time signals may have their speaking time reduced, and or those not violating the rules may be given extra time. Candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. Since the purpose of the meeting is to determine the candidate's views, no substitute for the physical presence of the candidate at in-person events will be allowed should a candidate be unable to attend. No written or recorded statement may be provided in lieu of active participation by a candidate. Forums require participation by 2 or more candidates for each contested seat. The use of props, charts, or visuals, and the display of campaign collateral or apparel is prohibited. And in accordance with league policy, the league owns the content of its forums. Audio or video recording by authorized members of the media will be permitted only if agreed to by all candidates present. The league maintains the right to record the forum and publish it on the LWV-controlled electronic pages. No other recording will be allowed. No partial transcript or recording may be published without written permission from the league. Thank you for listening to the rules, the candidate rules. And like you, we are here because we believe that citizenship requires both knowledge and civic engagement, and that the responsibility of maintaining good government rests on the shoulders of citizens. That is, everyone here. So we have some expectations for you, so just a few more guidelines and rules. Please be sure your cell phones are turned off or silenced. You are here tonight to listen to the candidates, so all candidates will be offered equal opportunity to speak. And again, our purpose tonight is to listen to their views on issues. We encourage you to ask questions by submitting cards. League members will be handing them out. Please write legibly, 1 question per card. Questions will be vetted by the league members to ensure legibility and a wide range of issues, and so that, as we mentioned before, they're not duplicated, personal or abusive, or biased questions. As the moderator, I'll stop the debate if the audience is interrupting. Interruptions, just as a reminder, reduce the time that the candidates can speak, and again, we're here to listen to their views on issues. To repeat, the league policy permits only authorized recordings of these forums. Taking clips or segments is not authorized. And any audience member who violates the league procedures or disrupts the forum may be asked to be removed. So we thank you again for being here tonight to learn from each of the candidates who seek to represent you. When the candidates arrived, they drew straws for speaking order. Ms. Keiserman will go first for opening remarks. I'll now ask the audience to applaud briefly after each candidate's opening remarks, and then to hold all applause again until after the closing statements. Ms. Keiserman?
Is that working?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you to the League for holding this forum, and thanks to everyone who has joined us tonight. In recent years, I have sat where you are all sitting more times than I can count, listening to these candidate events, often rooting for one of the people sitting up here, but never imagining that I would ever be one of them. So part of the story I want to tell you tonight is how I went from being a concerned citizen sitting out there to being a first-time candidate sitting up here. When I introduce myself, I sometimes have a hard time deciding how to describe myself. I'm an educator, a mom, and now a candidate. But most of all, I think of myself as an advocate. For many years now, advocacy for the issues I care about has been central to my life, and I have spent most of my time on my leadership roles in nonprofit and community organizations. I've spent years working for excellence in my local schools and equitable access to community services because I believe every child should be empowered to reach their full potential, and every person in our communities should be welcomed and valued. I have worked for environmental causes because I believe it's long past time we got serious about protecting Long Island's environment and addressing the crisis of climate change. I've worked to mobilize grassroots activism because I believe our democracy is at risk, and expanding political participation is crucial to strengthening it. And most recently, I worked to oust George Santos from Congress and elect Tom Suozzi because I believe representation is central to democracy, and we are all entitled to an honest, effective voice at every level of government. So it is these beliefs that propelled me from concerned citizen to candidate, and these are the values and priorities I want to take to Albany. Long Islanders face major challenges, and I believe we deserve to be represented by someone who can bring us together to find real solutions, not someone who fearmongers, sows divisions, and panders to the extremes of their party. To regain our voice in Albany, it's vital that we flip this seat, and I have done years of grassroots work necessary to achieve that goal. That is why I have won the endorsements of Tom DiNapoli, Tom Suozzi, Grace Meng, Anna Kaplan, Gina Solitti, Laura Curran, Delia DeRigi-Witten, John Kamen, Judy Bosworth, Marianne Delamonte, Christine Liu, Robert Zimmerman, Planned Parenthood, Everytown for Gun Safety, and so many other leaders and organizations. These endorsements represent the hard work I've done to unify our party behind one overriding goal: winning in November. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ms. Keiserman. Mr. Schwartz.
Yes, thank you. First, I want to say thank you to the League of Women's Voters for holding this forum. You know, in races that have low visibility and exposure, like a state senate primary, candidates like Kim and I don't have that many opportunities to present our case to voters. So the fact that this forum is held is greatly appreciated, and the fact that it's also done voluntarily, thank you. I also want to thank everybody who's here tonight, because if you're here on a Thursday night, especially after Memorial Day, it means you're one of the really engaged people who is paying attention. And that is so critical right now in our democracy, because we are at a crisis. You know, it used to be that the most cynical thing that you would hear in politics or from voters was, my vote doesn't count. It was that one vote doesn't make a difference. Now it's gone from my vote doesn't count to my vote's going to be thrown in the garbage. That's such a dangerous place for our democracy to be. And I say this truly, not effusively. It's because of concerned residents like yourselves. You are helping to hold up the pillars of our democracy at such a critical time right now. So I also want to thank him as well. I have a special appreciation for the sacrifice she's making, because running as well has been quite an ordeal. You know, coming into this event tonight, we're given a 3-minute opening remark. And I'll tell you, every grain of my being wanted to prepare something. Write it down on paper and just feel safe, right? Get everything down. Because it's a great opportunity, why not? So I wrote a draft, wasn't resonating, wrote a second draft, still wasn't resonating. Finally, by the third draft, I read it and I thought, this is actually really good. Maybe I should use this. It says everything that I've been trying to say in a short amount of time. And I sat on it for a day and I realized, why is this not sitting with me? Why is this not resonating? Why am I not excited to say this at the forum? And I realized it's because I don't want to hear pre-scripted or rehearsed answers from candidates. I think it's the thing that I'm getting really tired of. You know, we want authenticity, we want truthfulness, because it's really lacking. I felt like this is a community event. I should approach it the same way I do when I go to doors, you know, or I make phone calls, which is I introduce myself. Hi, I'm Brad Schwartz. I'm running to be your next state senator. Do you have a question for me? Or is there any issue that you would like to discuss? And I really want to use this forum because it's the perfect forum to do that as a real, true community event. And again, I thank all of you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. We'll now begin with the questions. And just a reminder, we ask that you hold your applause till the end after closing statements so that we can hear their answers. So, Mr. Schwartz, you will go first with this question. Jack Martins has proved to be a formidable candidate. Why do you think you can defeat him in a general election when Anna Kaplan did not do so the last time?
That's an excellent question. So one of Jack Martin's strengths is that he is a fearmonger, right? I mean, that's sort of the Republican playbook in many ways. My area of research and expertise is combating disinformation and propaganda. So I understand pretty much exactly what Jack Martins is doing all the time. I know how to respond to that kind of messaging. I understand the techniques that are being used. And, you know, combating disinformation in this environment, being able to debate Jack Martins on a stage, that we really need somebody that can go toe-to-toe with him on messaging. And I believe that I can do that. I've already laid out what I believe to be his vulnerabilities. One of his great vulnerabilities is the fact that in next year, there was a law that was passed that limits the cap on how much a state legislator can make outside of the state legislator, and his salary is too high to serve in the state legislature. So he technically will not qualify to be a state senator. And I think that's going to be a very resonant issue with voters because it's going to create another sort of crisis that we're going to have to deal with. Similar to Santos, not exactly, but, you know, not too far off.
Thank you. Ms. Keiserman?
Thank you.
I'm happy to stand.
No,
I don't want to stand.
Unfortunately, if you want to try and move your chair up, if you're having a hard time seeing, but we're going to have the candidates seated at the table. This is what was agreed to initially. You know, we apologize if there aren't great sight lines in the back. Ms. Keiserman? If, you know, again, we apologize that the sight lines aren't ideal. If some of you want to move forward, there are a couple spots closer up, or if you want to try and move your chair out, you know, in the aisle. But the candidates are going to remain seated. They'll give their closing statements standing. So, Ms. Keiserman, if you'd like me to repeat the question.
Please go ahead and repeat the question, if you don't mind.
So the question is, Jack Martins has proven to be a formidable candidate. Why do you think you can defeat him in a general election when Anna Kaplan did not do so the last time?
Well, thank you. I think there are a few ways I'd like to answer that question. I agree that he's a formidable candidate, but this is also a different year than 2022 when Anna Kaplan lost the election. That was a year that was particularly tough with Democrats. The upcoming year should be different. There's a few things that make it different. First of all, Jack Martins himself and his performance. He simply has not been very present in the district, and it's been noticed. I hear about it when I go and I knock on doors and talk to voters. He's not able to deliver for the district because he's a member of the minority. And his rhetoric, as Brad mentioned, is increasingly hardline and out of touch with the values of our district. As we come into an election year that's a presidential election, we can count on high levels of voter turnout, which will be helpful to Democrats. So I believe that this is a very winnable election. This seat is flippable. We can do it, and there's a few reasons why I believe I'm qualified to do it. First of all, my years of building coalitions within the community because of the work that I've done in a number of different groups, particularly in building Democratic clubs. Second, my formidable fundraising as I've built my campaign infrastructure. I've raised $600,000, including the matching funds, which is the most of any primary candidate in the state. Finally, my endorsements.
Thank you. The next question will Ms. Keiserman will answer first. What are your plans to bring jobs to Long Island?
My plans to bring jobs to Long Island are rooted in my climate plan. I believe that we should see climate change not simply as a crisis, but as an opportunity. This is an opportunity to begin to switch from fossil fuels and to renewables, and there are many green union jobs that will come out of that transition. We need to be doing that transition in a way that is very, very deliberate and careful, and focused on making sure that we're not leaving any workers behind, but the future of green energy jobs is very bright. I also believe that we need to be focusing on revitalizing our main streets. Many of us over the years have been very concerned about the closing of businesses on our main streets. We need to be providing businesses with tax incentives to open, and we need to be focusing on providing supports for our businesses so that they can open, they can stay open, and they can get the workers that they need to thrive.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz?
Sure. I'd like to piggyback off that because I think that happens to be a very good answer. I think there is a very great opportunity for New York, for Long Island, in terms of renewable clean energies. If you look at what we're doing in terms of utilizing our best assets, and one of those is the fact that we're an island, and so we're building offshore wind farms. Long Island is actually becoming a leader of renewable clean technologies for the whole nation, right? So people always think that New York City has to be the center of our economy in New York. It doesn't. Long Island is just as well prepared to be. I have a whole case to make about upstate New York as well. Revitalizing downtowns is also critical, but in terms of, when you look at the offshore wind farms, you have so many jobs that are created from that. And I'm just using this as an example. It's not just the primary benefits of hiring people to do the operations or lay the cables or construct the farms themselves. You have the secondary benefits. You have all the families that end up moving here because of those jobs and all the jobs that are created from those jobs. There needs to be more education that's provided. There needs to be more local businesses in order to serve those families. And then there are tertiary economic benefits as well. So I agree that we have a great opportunity in climate change to be able to address this. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz, the next question is for you. How do you plan to address the rising cost of living in our state to keep it affordable for middle and lower communities?
Okay, so this comes up year after year. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the burden of our property taxes is so onerous that it makes it essentially very prohibitive for a lot of people to live here. It's lower income, middle income families or individuals, also retirees on fixed incomes. Our property taxes are incredibly regressive. I would actually describe them as aggressively regressive. Our income taxes are progressive, right? It's based on the income that you make. So we need to find unique and innovative ways to reduce our property tax burden. A former state senator, John Brooks, had a really, really unique plan. I mentioned this actually at when I was speaking with Reach Out America, actually, which I'm I'd like to sort of explore, which is that we have three sources of, one of the biggest burdens that we have is one of the biggest expenses we have in our property taxes is school taxes. There are three sources of revenue for our schools. One is property taxes, residential, another is commercial, and another is foundation aid and state subsidies. On the North Shore of Long Island, we don't have a lot of commercial property to help subsidize the amount that our homeowners pay. So if we could basically create a cap of about the statewide average, which is about 55%. Sorry, it's sort of like being on a game show. Trying to get your answers.
Ms. Keiserman? Yeah, what do you do to plan to address the cost of living so that lower and middle communities can still stay in?
Right. Well, I agree that property taxes is a big part of this issue, and it's a big part of the reason, along with the cost of housing, transportation, and childcare, that people are leaving the region. This is a big problem for Long Island. I always say that we want to create Long Island communities that are welcoming, affordable, and vibrant. And we can't do that if our young people are leaving and not coming back, if our seniors can't afford to stay here in retirement, and if we are not able to attract working people to work in our businesses and keep them open. So we need to focus on finding ways to decrease the tax burden and make sure that we do get our fair share for the taxes that we do pay. There are a number of opportunities that I think that we have to try to not only decrease our tax burden, but also lower the cost of living more generally. For one thing, one of the reasons I work so hard for Tom Swazi, because he will be a leader in restoring our state and local tax deduction. That's extremely important. Finally, in addition, we need to work to lower taxes on small businesses, making it easier for them to stay open, operate, and attract workers. We need to support programs that make it easier for families to make ends meet. Universal pre-K, access to affordable childcare, access to elder care, comprehensive wraparound services for seniors that allow them to stay in their home and be able to retire here rather than moving to Florida.
Thank you. The next question for Ms. Keiserman. What are your top two priorities in education, not just for the district, but also for the state?
Education has been at the center of my entire adult life. My career has been in education. I was a high school history and government teacher at the beginning of my career, and I've worked in education consulting, curriculum development of teacher resources for about the last 10 years, and education's also been at the center of my advocacy. So it's near and dear to my heart, and it's very hard to pick two priorities. But I would say the most important priority is to make sure that our schools are fully funded. We are supporting our public schools, which is the reason so many people live here on Long Island in the first place. And that's got to be the first priority of any legislator, protecting funding for our public schools, particularly foundation aid, and making sure that we are working against any cuts that would lower the quality of the education our students are getting. I also think that our schools and our education system can be an important source of, it can be an important tool for combating the hate and discrimination that we're seeing in our communities with the rise of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Asian hate, anti-LGBTQ hate, and other forms of hate that have been plaguing our communities. I believe our schools are an important tool for teaching kids to have attitudes of respectful curiosity about differences, and this is an important aspect of our curriculum.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz?
Sure. I would say that my first priority is working on the reformulation of foundation aid. So foundation aid is the way that our state essentially helps to subsidize our public schools, and the formula that's been used is antiquated at this point. It's complicated, it's a very complicated algorithm, and it continues to be more expensive every year. So Governor Hochul is interested in finding a reformulation, and that's going to be a very important issue. We want to make sure that however that calculation is formulated, that it benefits our local schools here in District 7 on the North Shore of Long Island. And we also want to make sure that areas that have underrepresented minorities are also being adequately funded. So this is a really important issue that's going to be worked on over the next couple of years. And I want to be deeply involved in that. Another area that we need to tackle is the teacher shortage that we have in New York, right? It's projected that in 5 years, about a third of the teachers' workforce is going to retire. Meanwhile, in terms of the teachers that we're training, it's about 50% lower than it was in 2010. We need to find ways to attract teaching talent to our state. The New York State government just recently improved Tier 6. That was a really wonderful success in terms of improving the pensions for younger teachers or newer teachers. Thank you.
The next question is for Mr. Schwartz. Reproductive rights are under attack. What would you do to protect them? Do you support a woman's right to choose? And what do you think of surrogacy?
Well, that's a lot of questions in one. Let me start by saying that I am very fortunate that I was raised by two amazing parents who ingrained in me a tremendous respect for a woman's right to choose. My parents are both recipients of the Margaret Sanger Award, which is the highest lifetime achievement award that you can receive in Planned Parenthood. And while as an adult I may not always agree with my parents on all issues, I am certainly their legacy in that regard. And right now we are in a post-Dobbs environment. We need to really be expanding our services because we need to serve as a sanctuary for women who are coming here from out of state because they don't have abortion care. So that's very important. In terms of IVF, we need to clarify the language that currently exists in our legal code because it's not as inclusive and welcoming as we'd expect from a liberal state. I don't have as much time to address that. I would like to use this opportunity to clarify something, which is on Kim Keiserman's website. It says my opponent's record. And it says my opponent has an F rating with Planned Parenthood. She's referring to Jack Martins, who is not her opponent. I am her opponent. And I wanted to clarify that, thank you, because I'm not sure if it was intended to be deliberately misleading, and if it was a mistake, I'm certainly hoping that it will be corrected, because I think it's important for us to stick together at such a critical time on such an important movement.
I've always got my sights on flipping the seat. No offense, though. I realize that you are indeed pro-choice, as am I. In fact, I would say that my belief in reproductive rights and bodily autonomy is central to my political philosophy. And in fact, it's a big part of the reason I became a Democrat as a young person. It's a big part of the reason I became politically active after Donald Trump was elected. It's a big part of the reason I'm running for office now. And it's a big part of the reason I have the endorsement of Planned Parenthood, which I'm so proud of. So this is a time that's critical for the issue of reproductive rights. Next month will mark 2 years since the Dobbs decision, which set women back 50 years for bodily autonomy. And since then, millions of women have lost basic freedoms. We've been lucky here in New York, but we can't count on that luck to continue. Anyone who thinks it can't happen here needs to remember how close we came to having a Governor Zeldin. Even now, the ERA is under attack, and right-wing forces have fought to remove it from the ballot. So we can't afford to be complacent. We can't afford to be okay with being represented by so-called moderates, like the incumbent, who say they're not focused on the issue, all the while backing and enabling extremists who will stop at nothing until they take away reproductive rights. So we need to be represented by someone who will make New York a leader.
Thank you. The next question is for Ms. Keiserman. There has been a significant rise in anti-Semitism since October 7th. As state senator, what would you do to protect the Jewish community and reduce anti-Semitism?
Thank you very much. That's a very important question. I want to just start by saying how personal this issue is for so many people in our community. Our state is home to the highest concentration of Jewish people outside of Israel. And in our district especially, many families have direct ties to Israel, including the family of Omer Nutra, who is currently being held hostage by Hamas. We also are home to a large and growing Muslim population, many of whom are also experiencing heartache from the international situation. So we have seen a growth, a surge really, in anti-Semitism and other forms of hate that's been accelerated by the events of October 7th. As a state legislator, it will be my job to look for ways to combat this surge of hate. My background is in education, and I've worked throughout my career to create curricula and teacher resources that help teachers to promote religious literacy and combat religious bullying and bigotry in the classroom. I will bring that professional background with me to Albany and work to create curricula that will combat anti-Semitism in our schools.
Mr. Schwartz.
So I think the unfortunate reality of the situation that we find ourselves in this is the most virulent anti-Semitism that most of us have ever witnessed. I don't think any of us ever expected that we would see college students and protesters chanting from the river to the sea. And that is happening on too many college campuses. And when we talk about education, somehow our education has gotten so off track that it has allowed this kind of anti-Semitism to seep into curriculum. And so I believe we have to take a very strong stance on turning this train around. And so I propose, and I understand that this is a hard stance, but Jewish students on campuses deserve to be protected. So do the professors at Columbia. Students were told not to show up to school because the school could not protect them, and there are still people questioning whether or not that constitutes anti-Semitism. So I believe that if schools like NYU and Columbia, which are exempt from property taxes under New York state law, if they can't get their anti-Semitism under control, I believe New York State should revoke that privilege that they are given. Because thank you.
Please hold your applause.
Both of those universities are the largest landholders in all of New York City. And I believe that that's one way that we can really help get them in check, because this is dangerous.
Thank you. Just a reminder, we do ask you to please hold your applause. You'll have an opportunity at the end of their closing statements. Thank you. The next question for Mr. Schwartz. Do you believe that the New York Health Act should be passed?
So there's no issue, I don't think, maybe anti-Semitism. Healthcare has been so formative in my journey. I battled an illness for a decade and a half that was absolutely debilitating, and it transformed my life. It is the reason that I ended up deciding to pursue policy and government, because I experienced what the healthcare industry is like firsthand. And when I was going through that journey, it overlapped, it coincided with the national debate over the Affordable Care Act. So when Trump became our president, I was terrified that we were going to lose the Affordable Care Act. And so I stood up and I was in support of the New York Health Act, because our state needs to serve as a buffer to an abusive federal government. Since then, I do not believe at this current time there is enough urgency to pass the bill. Because if there were, well, we have a supermajority in the state Senate. We control the New York State government, Democrats do, and it has not passed. There is not the will to pass it right now. Do I support single payer? Yes. Do I think right now is the time to institute the New York Health Act? No. And I'm not somebody who is going to just keep consistent for the appearance. I think it's important to be flexible. I think it's important to know when the right time is. And I don't believe that right now is.
Thank you, Ms. Keiserman.
Well, let me just say that I believe health care is a human right, and I support federal efforts to address the problem. But since federal action has been inadequate, I support action at the state level. Millions of people are underinsured or uninsured altogether, and it's especially true of people of color, and that's resulting in disparities that we should never accept. Millions of people forego care simply because of cost. So I do believe we need comprehensive, high-quality health care for all. Primary, specialty, reproductive, dental, vision, hearing, long-term care, prescription drugs, the whole bit. And I believe that health care should be patient-centered, not profit-driven. So I support universal health care efforts, but recognize that the transition needs to be done very carefully, very deliberately, and probably very slowly. I believe there's other ways that we can be working to reform our healthcare system as well. For instance, we need to be doing something to address the nursing shortage and shortage of other kinds of healthcare workers, which are so critical to patients receiving the care that they deserve. We need to be working to recruit and retrain nurses and other healthcare workers and ensuring they get the support that they need and also the pensions that they deserve. We need to fix Tier 6 for nurses as well. We need to make sure that all of our hospitals get adequate funding, and that includes public, rural, urban, safety net hospitals. And we need to ensure that both rich and poor are able to get high quality care.
Thank you. The next question is for you, Ms. Keiserman. What measures can be taken to reduce damage to our waterways from pollution and storm runoff?
So this is a critically important question, and it's something that I actually see when I look out my front window. When I look out my front window, in front of me, I see in the distance Manhasset Bay. And to my side, I see Baxter's Pond. Baxter's Pond is one of the main waterways that runs into Manhasset Bay. And I happen to lead an organization called the Baxter's Pond Foundation that works to be the environmental steward for the pond and protect the water that goes into Manhasset Bay. Baxter's Pond is actually a drain that has an infrastructural function to protect Manhasset Bay. We see, when we look at Baxter's Pond, so much plastic, styrofoam, food packaging waste, other forms of packaging waste that gather in this pond, getting trapped before some of it moves into Manhasset Bay. And we know that what we see is only the tip of the iceberg because there is also all the chemical contaminants that we don't see. We need to be much more mindful about what we're doing to our water here on Long Island. It is a precious resource. There are many things that we can be doing to protect it. One of the most important is an act that's being considered right now in the legislature, the Packaging Reduction Act. I'll get back to that later.
Thanks. Can you repeat the question? Because
Yes.
my mind goes in two different areas with this.
Absolutely. What measures can be taken to reduce damage to our waterways from pollution and storm runoff?
You know, I'll be honest. I always try to be honest. This is not an area that I have, tremendous expertise in. Water is obviously a very important issue that we're dealing with on Long Island. I certainly don't want to deflect from the conversation. We have a lot of cleanup efforts to do. If you look at the Hudson Valley was polluted with a chemical that it's called a forever chemical because it's very difficult to dredge up. And the EPA originally had invested in helping us clean up the Hudson. And they did all these dredging efforts and eventually concluded that the Hudson River was essentially good to go. That turns out not to be the case. Recent studies have shown that the sediment is still holding those chemicals. So I think an important area is getting the state to really pressure the EPA to help us clean up our waterways. In terms of sewage, I think, you know, transitioning from as many septic tanks to sewage system is also critical because we have a lot of nitrogen that ends up in our estuaries as well. But again, you know, I'm not an expert in this field, and this is one of those areas where I would really take the advice of people who knew better than myself.
Thank you. The next question is for Mr. Schwartz. What is your opinion on the most recent budget?
Oh, that's a really great question. So let me just start by giving credit where credit is due. There have been a lot of budgetary issues that have been challenging the state legislature and the governor, and I think they did a pretty good job of keeping the budget austere without raising taxes, and I think they deserve credit for that. I mean, we have a lot of compounding issues. One of them is the fact that we have been receiving federal aid, especially since COVID, and that's expiring, or most of which has already expired. And that had been in our previous budget, so we have to be more austere. My mind goes to housing, because that was such a big, hot button issue. There were some really good housing initiatives that were passed. I think the governor learned from the first housing initiative that she tried to pass that it's better to incentivize than mandate. And so there was a lot of investment in trying to encourage pro-housing communities. For example, more money invested into the Long Island Investment Fund. Sorry, also downtown revitalization efforts. Did you also ask what were the pros of it? What was the question?
Just your opinion on the budget.
Oh, my opinion, okay. And yeah, I was a little bit disappointed with the compromise on good cause eviction. I'm not the biggest fan of good cause eviction, and I think the compromise may, in the long term, do more damage, potentially, and also the extension of the 421A tax abatement, I think, was very good for affordable housing.
Thank you. Ms. Keiserman?
Well, I agree that the housing compromise in the budget was a good thing, and I would add that also, you know, it was a real relief to see the foundation aid restored. The hold harmless provision for foundation aid was restored, and following on the budget, then the conversation turned, as Mr. Schwartz pointed out, to updating the formula for foundation aid, and I thought that was an important measure too. There were also important measures for child care in the budget, and also for providing funding for women who are in need of help and economic assistance in accessing reproductive care. So that was important as well. There was an disappointing aspect to the budget, and it goes back to what we were discussing before, which is the environment. The budget did not include as many environmental provisions as one would have hoped, and I know that the legislature has been trying to wrap some of that up in the meantime, including the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act that I referred to. There was money for water in the budget, however, and $500 million, I believe, and that's really important. It kind of goes back to a discussion we were talking about before. I really think that the discussion of water is extremely important. We need to be making sure that we are providing funding for water suppliers so that they can be working on these forever chemicals that Mr. Schwartz mentioned.
Thank you. Ms. Keiserman, the next question is for you. How would you improve civics education in public schools in order to increase participation of young people?
Well, this is the reason I went into education was to be involved in civics education. I was, a long time ago, I was a high school government and history teacher, and then later on went into curriculum development. So this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I believe in, especially in the age that we are living in now, civics education has become more important than ever, and Mr. Schwartz referred to it before, in part because students are bombarded with information from so many different sources, and they need to be taught the skills to determine whether information is from a reputable source, a disreputable source, and whether there's bias in that source or not. So part of civics education has to be helping students to sift through all of the information that is bombarding them and to identify possible mis- or disinformation and understanding where the biases will come from. I think that in our day and age, too, we really need to be teaching students the basic values of democracy. What are the principles that our democracy was founded upon, and how are those principles lived out today in an age where we see real threats to democracy? We need to be clear with students about, it's not just about being, I'll come back to that later.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz?
Yes, I think the point about teaching students about democracy is critical because, again, we are at a crisis. And if we don't teach our younger generation to appreciate the sacrifices that have been made for this country and the role that the United States has taken in the world to spread our ideals, our ideology of democracy, that's a fascinating story, right? And kids love stories. And this is a great one. America, I don't say this effusively, we are really the greatest story that history has ever told. And so I think really taking it from an angle that can engage students. Again, I'm not an educator, but I do view things through the lens of narratives. And there's so much important lessons to be learned from history so that we do not repeat them. I agree with Kim that there should be sections of civics courses that are dedicated to media literacy, I would call it, in terms of being able to identify disinformation and biases so that students understand that what they're getting on their phone, they're algorithmic feeds. So when they're, for example, disagreeing with somebody in an argument, take the time to find objective sources. Objective sources. We need to teach that. I would love to consult with educators and hear their opinions on this, and Kim's as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz, the next question is for you. Do you support affordable, multi-family housing in villages to improve business districts?
Yes, I do. I think I'm a very strong supporter of transit-oriented housing because I think it provides a unique opportunity to, first of all, attract people to Long Island. That's really important, right? When you build around transit hubs, there are a lot of different benefits to that. One is it's attractive to commuters and to young families. So, that's something that we need. Also, I think creating a pedestrian lifestyle is very appealing to a lot of people. And it's also good, I think, for seniors as well. We need more density. We need people to have accessibility and also accessibility to transportation. We could have an entire conversation here about the need to expand our public transportation infrastructure. Yes, I agree. I think it will also help to bring in small businesses. And people sometimes ask, like, what is your plan to protect small businesses and fight for small businesses? Sometimes not every single answer has to be legislative. There are legislative solutions to some degree, but you want to shop locally. And that's an opportunity for people to do it right outside their doorsteps by increasing the density around our transportation hubs.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Do you support affordable multifamily housing in villages to improve business districts?
I'd like to start just by taking us back a couple of years ago when Governor Hochul made a proposal, the housing compact proposal, to address the issue of affordable housing. There was a lot of concern about the proposal overriding local control and local zoning, and there was a strong backlash to that. And I think we need to be aware of that. We need to hear that backlash. People on Long Island really do value local control over zoning. And as a result, we saw a housing compromise this year that was more about carrots rather than sticks and about opting in. And I think that was positive. There's no doubt that that affordable housing is a real crisis on Long Island. And so I think with the lesson that I've learned from that is, in order to address that, we need to bring stakeholders together, local leaders, and talk about ways that we can begin to, in a way that builds community support, find ways to do transit-oriented development so that people have more housing options, so that we can attract young people, we can keep empty nesters here, and we can have the people here who will work in our businesses and help revitalize our main streets. It is important for the future vibrancy of Long Island.
Thank you. The next question is for Ms. Keiserman. The last 3 Democratic candidates who have lost all tried to win via mailings and media ads. Will both of you pledge to walk the streets, hold rallies, hold debates, and be out in the public?
Well, that's what I've been doing for almost 8 years now. After the election of 2016, I was down in the dumps, to put it mildly, and a friend of mine told me about a new club that was forming called the Port Washington Democratic Club and suggested I go there. I went there alone, knowing nobody, and raised my hand and volunteered to get involved. And what it turned out being in the Port Washington Democratic Club meant was going out, knocking on doors, talking to voters, making phone calls, putting lawn signs on lawns, lots of unsexy work like that got me out in the community, got me talking to voters, and I found out that I liked it, I enjoyed it, and I was good at it. So not only do I pledge to do that, but it's a big part of the reason I'm running for state senate. I enjoy getting out in the community and talking to voters and having the discussions about the future of this district, finding out the things that people care about, and just being present in that way. I think, I'm not sure that I agree with the characterization that that's why the last other elections were lost. I actually believe that we do have a vibrant political culture here on Long Island. I've been part of it.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz.
Sure. I, of course, accept that pledge as well. I think it's very important to go back to the tradition of politics, which is being engaged, going door to door, and meeting with residents, because we have this problem of voters becoming disengaged. So how do you engage them? You go out and you meet people, and you discuss issues, and you remind them why it is so important to vote in elections, for example, like this one. And, I speak to so many people that say, oh, I didn't know that there was an election happening right now. And I get it, because there are so many. We had a special election in February. Then we had the presidential primary. Then after that, we had the school boards. Now it's Kim and I. And, there's a sense of people not feeling like they're informed, not feeling like they're engaged. And I don't think there is a better way than personally introducing yourself to somebody and having that personal connection. I mean, that's what politics used to be about. And I don't even like the word politics. I mean, I don't think most of us do. It's public service, right? That's what we're applying for, is to be public servants. And that requires interacting with your community.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz, the next question is for you. What do you think about the new secure firearms law?
The new secure firearms law. I'm not particularly familiar with that law. Was there any more information written?
There is not.
Okay. I can discuss, certainly New York's record on gun safety and our record on gun violence prevention. Every town ranks New York State as the second best state in terms of legislation that has been passed. And what makes New York a very unique state is that a lot of that success has a lot to do with the action of citizens. For example, Moms Demand Action. This is a group that Kim has been engaged in. And you know, her endorsement was very well deserved. I think it's very important to, you know, compliment where compliments are due. We've passed red flag laws here. Those red flag laws could probably be expanded. You know, we have passed conceal and carry as well. There's been legislation that was passed for micro-stamping of ammunition. That's also very helpful. And you know, there's always progress to be made on this front. Sometimes it is difficult, especially when you're running a campaign. My favorite thing used to be to wake up in the morning and read the New York Times. It's the most relaxing part of my day. Fortunately, I haven't had it, so I must have missed that bill, or I know it by a different name.
Ms. Keiserman?
So I'm assuming that that refers to safe storage, the act to mandate safe storage, but I'm not positive of that as either. But I'm just going to move forward as if that's what that means. So yes, I am proud to say that I have been that the issue of sensible gun laws and bringing an end to the epidemic of gun violence in our country has been near and dear to me for a long time. And I am proud to live in a state that is the second most sensible in the nation. But unfortunately, we are very much affected by the policies of the states that surround us. And even in a state like New York, where we have enacted sensible gun laws, we have a shocking level of gun violence. So it's something that I'm proud that I've been committed to for many years as a mom's volunteer. I'm proud that I attended Demand a Seat candidate training sessions, and I'm proud that I am a Moms Demand Action Gun Sense candidate and that I have the endorsement of Everytown for gun safety. The issue of safe storage is one that is extremely important because it's about keeping children safe from firearms that are in their home. And one of the most important things that we can be promoting is ensuring that that the understanding of safe storage is being shared through our schools.
Thank you. Ms. Keiserman, Las Vegas Sands is trying to make Nassau County home to the second largest casino in the USA. Do you have a position on the casino? And if not, what criteria will you consider as you formulate your position?
The proposed casino is on hold, and it is also not in our district. So I have not taken an official position on the casino. However, I would say that if it's going to move forward, it would be my hope that the concerns of the community regarding traffic, regarding crime, and regarding congestion, and also the concerns that people have about gambling addiction affecting our communities, I would hope that all of those concerns would be addressed, and that if the project is going to go forward, that our leaders work to ensure that we're getting the maximum benefits for the project, and that the community has a role not only in getting those benefits, but in having a say as to how it moves forward.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz.
Yes, I think you outlined a lot of good points there that I agree with. I'm opposed to the casino. I think it is very important to listen to the community around the casino, which is saying they are not interested. And also, traffic is a very big issue with that location. Think about that nodule over there. You have the Meadowbrook, you have the northern state, the southern state. The Nassau Coliseum was put in that location specifically because of its accessibility. It was meant for occasional events that would cause traffic. It wasn't meant for there to be everyday congestion happening at one of the most critical junctures that we have in our highways. So I think that in and of itself is a reason not to go forward with the casino. And, but again, I think listening to the community is important. I don't think that that's the value of our party, is to impose anything onto communities that they're actively saying, no, we do not want this here. And so I think it's important to listen. I mean, that's what our job is. Our job is to listen and respond. And sometimes we'll have our own opinions, but I think it's a very clear message that the community has sent.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz, what is your reaction to Governor Hochul's statement yesterday regarding congestion pricing?
I was elated. I was elated. I think that congestion pricing in principle has some good ideas, right? We want to reduce congestion. We also want to meet the benchmarks that New York State has set forth in terms of reducing carbon emissions and the use of fossil fuels. So there are good ideas behind it. The problem is the implementation, right? Or the proposed implementation. It really appeared to be more of an MTA money grab than anything. And here on Long Island, we're like a donor district. Anytime there's an issue in the state or in the city, we are asked to subsidize it. And that's essentially what congestion pricing was asking us to do. And as soon as the congestion pricing passed, we saw our Long Island Railroad tickets increase. And we didn't see any expansion in our bus services. If you are telling people that they cannot commute into the city, right, and to stop driving their cars, then create incentives for them to use public transportation. Expand public transportation. It was just so poorly instituted. So I was very happy to hear that the governor paused it, what appears to be indefinitely. And I guess we'll see.
Ms. Keiserman?
We're very much in agreement on this issue. I issued a statement yesterday, actually, congratulating the governor and thanking the governor for pumping the brakes on congestion pricing. I was deeply concerned about what the impact would be if the plan were to go into effect on working people in our district who have to travel into the city for their jobs, or for doctor's appointments, or for many other matters that are simply not optional for people, and don't have the option because of where they're coming from, or where they're going, or what they're carrying, or when they're traveling, to use public transportation. What would be the impact on those Long Islanders who have to do that day in and day out? It could have really been quite devastating. And so I did not want, though I agree that the goals of reducing congestion and the environmental goals are certainly worthy, and I think we're all in favor of those goals, they cannot be on the backs of our working people who are struggling financially already, and already dealing with the high cost of living that we've been discussing. And whatever plan is put in place, we need to make sure that it's equitable and that what we are putting into it from Nassau County, we are getting back for our own transit system, which is badly in need.
Thank you. Ms. Keiserman, if you are elected, what committees would you like to sit on in the state Senate, and why?
Well, I would say education would be first and foremost because of my career and my history of advocacy and my passion. Also, environmental conservation would be extremely important to me because of the work that I'm doing currently on Long Island and the work that I hope to continue to do. I've really made the environment central to my life, my advocacy, and also to my campaign, and it's central to what I want to work on as a public servant. I would add transportation because it's an important part of any environmental agenda, and it's an important part of improving life, improving the quality of life for Long Islanders, to improve our transit system and make it easier for us to get around Long Island and to get to the city. And then, I would add there's a committee that deals with women's issues in particular, and that would be of interest to me as well.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, It's a good question, and I just want to also create realistic expectations that as freshman state senators, if we're elected, we will not have our pick of the litter in terms of the committees that we sit on. I would say that my mind immediately goes to veterans and homeland security. I have a graduate degree in, it's a master's in international public policy, and my area of research, I do doctoral research, as I mentioned, is specialized in foreign disinformation and propaganda primarily, which is directly correlated with national security threat. And so I'd be interested in having the state work with the federal government on national security issues and also serving our veterans. Ethics and governance. I mean, is anybody going to argue that we want to continue to create a framework that holds our government and our elected officials accountable? I would like to serve on the local government committee because I think in terms of addressing our high cost of living crisis, that's one of the committees where we can really, really explore and hopefully find innovative solutions. Let's see, probably budget and revenue as well would be a really good committee for that. So I would say those would be my top picks.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz, do you think lobbyists have too much influence? And what steps would you take to end the pay-to-play corruption?
Oh, this is such a big issue. I think I can't help but bring this up. I'm sorry, but we had recently, Kim and I are both participants in the public matching funds, the public campaign program, public finance program. And the whole purpose of that was to try to incentivize grassroots fundraising. The whole idea is, I'll explain it, that if you raise funds in districts, small dollar donations, from $5 to $250, the state will publicly match it by anywhere from a 10-to-1 to 12-to-1 ratio. The idea was to get big money out of politics. That was literally the whole purpose of it. And instead, all it has done is infuse more cash into our political system. Because if legislation like that is going to be passed, and it's enabling candidates to receive these large sums of money from the government, then we should also be banning corporate contributions, LLC contributions. We should be putting up guardrails for a form of legislation like that, because it's creating an entire cottage industry at this point. It really turned out to be more of a giveaway to incumbents than anything. And I mean, I could go on and on at length about this.
Thank you, Ms. Keiserman.
Well, I would say, I think that's a really big problem, and it's going to be a complex issue to deal with once we get to Albany. I'm not sure I have all the answers to getting lobbyists and money out of politics. I do think that the new public financing program is a start and part of the answer. It's very new. We are among the first candidates to be taking part in that program. So I don't know that we can say yet that it's a failure or that it's a giveaway. I think it's not enough. But I do believe, as someone who's taking part in it, that it's made a difference for me. As a first-time candidate who's worked for many, many years in the community and worked to build coalitions, I have been able to take advantage in a way that I would not have been able to do without that program. I have I've raised $600,000 because of that program. I have over 500 in district donors. I've been able to take the years of work that I've done in the grassroots and use that to go to people and raise small dollar contributions and really put together a formidable, well-funded campaign. And I would not have been able to do that had it not been for this program. So I don't think the program's a failure. I'm really encouraged, and I think I'm exactly the kind of person who's meant to benefit from it.
Thank you. Ms. Keiserman, how would you address State Senator Martin's narrative on the rise in crime in New York State?
Senator Martins has made crime a centerpiece of his social media and his messaging. And his messaging is always meant to be fear-mongering, and raising fears about crime. And I think that the reason that he's doing this is because at times it's been very effective. So I think as Democrats, we need to be very mindful that this has been effective in the past, and we need to be very thoughtful about pushing forth an alternative narrative and making sure that we have a message that is strong and positive about law enforcement and public safety. We can look back to Tom Suozzi's election and see that he handled these kinds of issues very, very skillfully, sort of taking the bull by the horns, refusing to accept the narrative, and saying, you know, no, I'm a Democrat and I'm strong on the issues that you're saying Democrats aren't strong on. So I think on the issue of public safety, we have to speak strongly in saying we care about public safety. We care about making sure that we have a holistic approach that doesn't allow a revolving door for violent criminals and recidivists, and that really takes that issue seriously.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz.
Sure. Well, I would point out to Jack Martins that we are one of the safest counties in the entire country, and I would point out to him that the biggest threat that our county has is our Republican county executive. Because he has now instituted a militia. And that militia is not just a local public safety issue. It is a national security threat because it is part of a wider MAGA movement to create a national infrastructure at the local level of insurrectionists. And that is what has been brought by his party to our doorstep. So I would very clearly remind him of that. I would also remind him that when you have public safety issues and there are ill-defined responsibilities, that is when the worst accidents occur. Because I can tell you that I am not going to stop if some random person who happens to own a gun tells me they're making a citizen's arrest. Are you? I think we have a lot of opportunity to counter this narrative and put the Republicans on the spot. You know, we don't do enough to preempt. We don't do enough to attack first. And this is one of those issues where we can preempt and we can anticipate very clearly what our response should be.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz, do you support the Invest in Our New York Act, which would raise $40 billion by making billionaires and ultra-millionaires pay their fair share in taxes?
I think New York is already a high tax state. I don't think that it is productive in the long run to convince the people who have the most flexibility to move, because a lot of the revenue that we get from our tax base also does come from wealthy people. I understand the sentiment behind it. I really do. Do I think it's the most practical solution to where we are right now? Probably not. You know, I don't think I have all that much more to say on the issue because it's really more of an agree-disagree sort of position. So I'm happy to let Kim take it from here.
I actually wanted to go back to the militia issue for a moment because it's something I've gone to the Nassau County legislature and spoken out about on a few occasions, and am engaged in an organization that's working to counter. So I think it's really important that you brought up the militia, and I think that that is something that Democrats really do need to be forceful in bringing up, because if Republicans want to make an argument that they are the party of law and order and try to present Democrats in a bad light on that, we need to be constantly reminding them about things like the militia and about the person that they have endorsed for president, who is a criminal, who led people in attacking our democracy on January 6th and has endorsed the actions of January 6 rioters that he now calls political prisoners. So we just need to take back that narrative and remind people of that. To go to the Invest in Our New York Act, I think my answer is kind of similar to Brad's. I'd have to study it more carefully to make an informed decision on that. I certainly believe in progressive taxation and that the very wealthy should pay much more than the rest of us, and that it is a source of revenue that we should look at. But I can't say for sure that I would support that specific act.
Thank you. Ms. Keiserman, both of you are pretty close to the issues. Most of us here care about electing a Democrat back into the seat. What do you each feel are your strengths that will position you to beat the incumbent?
So there are three things that I would say are my strengths in beating the incumbent. The first is, as I've said and come back to again and again, the years of work that I've done in this community in issue advocacy, on education, the environment, and in political organizing, in grassroots, bringing together grassroots groups to get out the vote for candidates at the federal, state, and local level. That has enabled me to build coalitions of support, which will provide me not only with voters, but with volunteers that I can work to give me the strength to move into general election. Second area of strength is in fundraising. As I mentioned, I have raised $600,000 with the matching funds. I have over 500 in district donors. And this is in strong contrast to my opponent, Mr. Schwartz, who has only recently unlocked the matching funds and has raised, I believe, only $80,000. And then third, my endorsements. My endorsements are from people I trust and people who have come to trust me, and I'm really proud of them. So endorsements, sorry.
Well, if you're including matching fund figures, then no, I have not raised just $80,000. It would be like reducing your fundraising without matching funds. That's not accurate. I think a big strength that I bring to the table is that I have the Working Families Party endorsement, which means I bring thousands of extra votes to the general election because we have a fusion voting system in New York State. So if I win the primary, I come with another party. So does Jack Martin's. He comes with the conservative line. So it is very important to carry a third party to offset his advantage, because we're talking about a very competitive swing seat that could be decided by a few thousand votes, 2,000 votes, 1,000 votes. The amount of votes that I bring to the table just through the Working Families Party, that's your margin of error right there, right? That's your margin of victory. So I think that's a big strength. Also, I'll tell you, I am definitely fighting the system right now. So if I succeed as the apparent underdog in the race, because I have the Democratic Party trying to do everything to squash my campaign, well, then I will have proven that I am quite the strong candidate to take on another established candidate.
Thank you. This is the final question before the closing statements. Mr. Schwartz, what will be the one issue you would work on if elected as your primary goal during your tenure?
It's sort of I would have to say, trying to tackle the high cost of living crisis on Long Island, because I think it's an existential threat to our region. I'm torn between also saying fighting climate change, because that's also an existential threat. It's really hard to say what exactly your number one priority would be. I could also bring fighting anti-Semitism and hate to the table. I'm an openly LGBTQ candidate, and that's an issue that I do care deeply about. I really believe in standing up against hate, regardless of whether it's aimed at me. Kim and I definitely share that. But fighting for our region right now, I think, is very important because, like Kim mentioned, people are leaving because they cannot afford to live here because of the prohibitive cost of living. I chair the Community Needs Bank at the Sid Jacobson JCC, so I'm very aware of how much, for example, food insecurity exists on Long Island, which people don't even believe is there, right? Because it sort of exists behind the facade of suburban comfort. But it's there, and it's getting worse all the time. And I think that is very illustrative of where things stand right now in Long Island.
Thank you, Ms. Keiserman.
So it was, what is,
What will be the one issue you would work on as your if you are elected as your primary goal during your tenure?
so since Mr. Schwartz didn't stick with just one, I don't think I will either. Because it is too hard to decide. I think if you're running for office, probably you're doing it because there are a host of things you're really concerned about. And I would put education at the top of the list, ensuring that we're fully funding our schools and that we're supporting our teachers and that we're working to recruit and retain teachers. That's incredibly important. But I also have to say that standing up against extremism and ensuring that we're protecting our bodily autonomy and reproductive rights is also at the very, very top of my agenda. I do not take for granted that extremism will never come to New York, and I want to ensure that New York will always be a leader in protecting not only people here and their bodily autonomy, but that people can come here and that they can access care that they need here in New York. That's incredibly important to me. The environment, I have put forth a strong environmental agenda. I'm calling it 7 for 7, 7 priorities for the 7th District. I'm incredibly proud of it. I can't possibly talk about all of it right now, but it really centers building climate resilient infrastructure in a proactive way, seeking out places where we have the needs, where our infrastructure is vulnerable, where we have flooding risk, and developing plans. And that's important too.
Thank you. Thank you both. Before the closing statements, I want to remind voters that the primary election is on June 25th at your regular polling place. And early voting begins on June 15th with 8 early voting sites, including these 4 nearest us: the Glen, Cove City Hall, the Port Washington Public Library, the Nassau County Board of Elections in Mineola, and the Yes We Can Community Center in Westbury. And information on absentee ballots and mail-in ballots are on the League information table at the entrance, and there's additional information on the Board of Elections website. So now we're going to move to closing statements. Ms. Keiserman, and this is where I encourage your applause after each closing statement.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. I moved to the North Shore of Long Island in 2001 and fell in love with this community. I raised my family here, and for over 20 years, I've worked to expand educational opportunity, protect our environment, elect public servants with decency and integrity, and do what I can to foster a more just, inclusive, and democratic community. When I've seen something that should be changed, I've stepped up and gotten to work. As an education advocate, I work to expand access to early childhood mentoring and enrichment programs for children in our district, especially underserved children. Leading the Baxter's Pond Foundation, I worked with legislator DeRiggi Whitten to secure $250,000 in long-needed capital improvements. When Trump was elected, I got involved in grassroots organizing, leading efforts to elect federal, state, and local candidates who would defend democracy and protect us from Trump's agenda. And as an organizer, I helped lead the fight to oust George Santos and restore meaningful representation to our community. I've spent the past 2 decades bringing people together to get things done. Now, I'm running for office because our current Senator, Jack Martins, is dividing people and failing to get things done. I don't believe this is the best we can do, and I don't accept the idea that Long Island is going red. Working on Tom Suozzi's victory in February, I can tell you firsthand that when we're organized, focused, and determined, Democrats can win on Long Island. I've been working hard to unify Democrats behind my candidacy, get people organized, fundraise, and build the strong campaign required to flip this seat. If you vote for me, I can assure you I will give this race everything I have and serve this district with the dedication, responsiveness, and integrity that you deserve.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Keiserman. Mr. Schwartz, your closing statement?
Sure. Again, I didn't prepare, but what I will say is that I'm a born and raised resident of the North Shore. I was born and raised in Roslyn, where I still live, and I love our community. It's really special. Long Island is really special. I'm such a proud New Yorker. I love our country. Democracy is something that I am really willing to fight for. Like I said at the beginning, I'd not be making this sacrifice otherwise. It is sacrifice. Kim deserves credit for that as well. I'm stepping up to fight. That's what I can tell you. And I'm, again, very grateful for all of you being here tonight. And Kim, I'm really glad that we had the opportunity to do this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. We want to say a few thank yous before you all leave. Thank you to the UUC and North Shore TV. I really want to congratulate both candidates for coming so prepared across so many issues. It's been an interesting and educational forum, so thank you. Thank you both. And lastly, but most importantly, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank you all for attending, for asking questions, for paying attention, and especially for being civically engaged. You are helping our democracy work. And, yeah. And please remember to vote. So thank you.